Welcome to Storj Institute's interview series. We are so happy to have Garrett Ransom here. He is a game changer in the blockchain field, offering technology that is helping with lending, decentralizing the process so that it is free, easy, and accessible to access financial support wherever you are in whatever stage of your business you are. Garrett, please introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about how you got into the project, what the project is, and how blockchain is changing the world through what you're offering.
For sure. Yeah, thank you for having me. I appreciate being here. So yeah, once again, my name is Garrett Ransom, and I'm the CEO of Thermal Labs. And we essentially provide small loans to small business owners, mostly in underserved communities. But we do that using blockchain technology to make it more transparent and community owned. So, I come from a background where my brother and sister-in-law started a business, and, I just really had a passion for small businesses and saw that there's a way to use blockchain technology to make that process more efficient about helping, small businesses get the capital that they need when they need it. So happy to be here, happy to dig more into my background, all that type of stuff.
Well, it's amazing, I think, especially impactful what you're doing, because we all know how difficult it is to get VC funding. We all know how difficult it is to get a bank loan for a business. How does what you offer ease business owners into the process of obtaining loans, and how does it create a space where people are able to communicate on a platform to interact and obtain the money that they need to finance their business?
Yeah, so I think over time it'll evolve. If I were to think about like the first version of what was created, it was pretty much like a lending cooperative where people provided between like $50,000 and $5,000 to a lending pool that was on Ethereum mainnet, right? So in this case, basically, it's just a group of people who really were taking ownership of, hey, we know that there's some businesses within our own network that need some funding, and we were able to offer some affordable loans to those people because we took ownership of that process and we used the DAO. So those people were able to get access to capital through our voting process, where they got a little bit of information about, the business, and then we're able to vote. And then, through the blockchain, we're able to actually give people access to that funding that they need. In terms of how I look at the long term, I think that there's like this synergy between like AI and blockchain technology, where we're going to be able to automate a lot of things that can drive down the cost of capital for small business owners. And I think also AI, like there's going to be a lot of data that we're going to be able to collect about business ownership, especially with B2B, where we haven't been able to capture before. Like, what are the things that an AI agent is maybe doing behind the scenes that can generate data that we can use to more accurately, underwrite loans for small businesses and give them better prices. So, long short, the first version kind of was more about ownership and creating a transparent process and helping out people within our network get access to capital with good rates. But over time, I think these rails, of these kind of emerging technologies will be able to, drive, change within the small business community across the globe.
It's so amazing, because I think so many people, between whether it's credit issues, whether it's, we talk about a lot within the community of how many issues are blocking people from accessing funding. How have you been able to bridge the gap so that those, historically, those blocks that have historically kept people out of the lending process, how do you bridge that gap for them?
Yeah, I think it's just recognizing, what the traditional system is and what it's not, and what gap that leaves within underserved communities. So, really, if you kind of look at the first step of it, what do small business, lenders typically use as the first kind of line of defense? It's going to be like a FICO score. It's going to be like a personal credit score, right? And a lot of times there are a lot of great small businesses that, have, good financials, they have good cash flow, all these things, but maybe for some reason, and some of it could be systemic kind of going in the background, like they don't have great credit scores, right? So it's being able to take first, like different data points, like alternative data points, to be able to use that in the underwriting model, to be able to accept people that are great small businesses that are, likely to repay their debt, but they just don't have the criteria that like directly fits into a bank. But yeah, the other part I think is just like using new technology to automate parts, to make certain parts of like the lending process cheaper, so you can pass off those cost savings to the small business owner and still be able to make a good business for yourself.
Well, the thing that is especially fascinating is this is a global opportunity for people. This isn't just, it's not just isolated to just the US. It's not just isolated to one country. It's now you're giving people literally across the globe the ability to participate in a system that they've always been shut out of before.
For sure. Yeah, exactly. That's the goal, right? Like be able to do it. Like it's small businesses rely on debt a lot of times to get their business started and in order to grow. The easier we can make for them to be able to use that engine, the better off they'll be and the more successful we'll see across small businesses, which, will have a ripple effect throughout communities across the globe, like you mentioned.
Yeah. So you have to now, it just begs the question, how did you get into this? Can you give us, some insight into your life before blockchain?
Yeah.
Before you got into this, and then just walk us through how this came into your space and how you decided how you got this opportunity to create this.
For sure. So I think my first real interaction with the financial system was through the Great Recession. I'm a kid growing up in the Bay Area, and I got a real up close view of like what a recession could do to a community. I grew up in Antioch, California. It's a very diverse community, but more or less like a middle class neighborhood. So, I remember like seeing all the foreclosure signs and all these things and just like the complete dynamics in my neighborhood changing at that point in time. And then within my household, I saw like, my parents who were, middle class, did everything right. Like my dad had a good, stable job and, he ended up getting laid off. And my first experience really with the financial system was seeing like my parents battling with debt collectors, trying to make sure that they, were able to still, provide for the family, put 3 kids through college, all those different things, right? So I saw during that process, like, oh, I think that there's area for growth in terms of like how fair, transparent that the financial system can be. And then, fast forward, I went to Morehouse College. I got the chance to do some cool stuff. I, worked on Wall Street for a couple summers, which kind of gave me like the, fundamentals of like, okay, this is how business might work at like a larger scale with like these larger big businesses and transactions, but overall, I think probably like one of the biggest parts of it was I got the chance to work with my brother and sister-in-law, on their business. They have like a web design agency where they work with a lot of social organizations in Boston. And, I was able to see up close what it looked like to be a small business owner, the capital challenges that they had, the reasons why they might end up being short on money, when and why, right? So it was really kind of those combining things, like having that interest from like personal experience, being able to work in a small business, and then also just having like, that background in finance to kind of bridge the gap. And of course, I worked at Storj and all this stuff and like learned blockchain technology, everything like that. And that's helped me kind of see like the trend of how blockchain technology can be used to kind of bridge the gap between those moving pieces.
I love that. So how do you think your pre-blockchain skills became this, Web3 superpower that you have now? Like what are the things that you think really allowed you to get your foundation started and get your foot in the door?
I think, so I'm a self-taught like programmer. So like I was, business major at Morehouse, like I said, worked on Wall Street, decided to do like this fellowship program for like startups. So was also interested in entrepreneurship. And that's kind of the route I went after I graduated from college. But yeah, I mean, I just spent mornings like at 5 a.m. just teaching myself how to code. Like there's this class called CS50 by Harvard. And I just struggled my way through like, those problem sets before I was starting my workday with my sister-in-law. And yeah, I think beyond that, like how I ended up kind of getting that entry point of starting in the Web3 space. Yeah, I think I just reached out to like 25 different companies and always kind of had my eye on like Storj, and ended up talking to, like the founder, Sean Wilkinson at the time, and just a bunch of other people until I ended up becoming a member of the data science and analytics team. And that was really kind of like my crash course, because a lot of people who worked at Storj were like very early on, like Web3 people, right? Crypto people. So that was kind of the crash course. But I always saw at the macro that like the technology could be used to empower communities, because that's exactly what Storj was doing, right? Some extra space, within my hardware, I want to rent that out. And because, it's so communal, you're able to pass off those cost savings and be cheaper than like an AWS S3. So I just saw like the way that kind of those moving pieces could be used, like, be pretty powerful. And just happened to kind of teach myself how to code early enough to be able to take advantage of that, opportunity when it presented itself to learn about the space.
Yeah, it's a huge hurdle for most people to make that jump into, especially to be a self-taught coder, but to really make that jump into it. What do you think are some of the biggest like blockchain myths that you've busted, that you've gone through, that you've been able to just be an example that these are not things that'll hold you back or deter you in the Web3 blockchain emerging technology space?
Yeah, I think it's about like what the technology is and what it isn't. I think, I just did some like policy work on Capitol Hill and got the chance to talk to like state, representatives and their staff members. And it's very interesting because, we can live in like an echo chamber where we think, oh, everybody knows that there are all these cool projects that are going on that are trying to work on these real world problems, right? Like, and you realize that that's not often what the actual exposure is. People's first, kind of like real, kind of like, oh, breaking news story might be about meme coins, which can be, cool, but yeah, maybe not as, there's pros and cons with it, right? It could be the FTX, it could be the big scandals, right? So I think it starts with like being able to be in front of people and talk about the real world use cases of the technology, how the technology is powerful in itself. People are good and bad. So any technology can be used for good and bad, and just actually just, showing people like the real stuff that people are doing. I mean, then allowing people, of course, like to play with it and giving people opportunity to play with the technology for themselves.
I feel like, it's such a driving force for innovation. How do you feel that what the technology that you've created now has the ability to push the tech forward, to push innovation forward in the next 5 years?
Yeah, so I think that there are like, some great moving pieces, some great tailwinds that, we hope to build on top of. So one, I think, that when I started building L2, layer 2, blockchains were kind of emerging. Now they're becoming more and more mainstream. I think that the, user experience using this technology is becoming like a lot easier. And, of course, there are all these things. The space is also trying to find that intersection between like, AI agents, all the cool stuff that's going on in AI as well as kind of Web3. I think that the really, really inspiring opportunity that I see is sort of within this, like bridging the gap between traditional finance as well as like, what's going on in DeFi, being able to create new types of products, right? Like, I think that there's going to be a lot of opportunities to automate a lot of financial workflows for small businesses. I think that there are going to be opportunities to just make the lending process more efficient. I think there's going to be the opportunity to, provide more liquidity to investors than has traditionally been outside of the space. So yeah, really just, I think that there's going to be a great opportunity for like small businesses, investors, institutions to be able to get into the space and, have some benefits from that.
Yeah, I feel like the opportunities are really easy to focus on and give us a platform. What do you think are some of the things that might be blockages that are obstacles to greater adoption of this technology?
Yeah, so I think a part of it is, continued awareness, but another piece of it is, just people have to create great products that solve like a real problem for, that can serve mass adoption and find those real world use cases where, people really want to use this product and it just happens to be blockchain based. I think that there are a bunch of businesses that are being built today that, serve like that crypto native space. And I think that, at some point that will cap out. You have to be able to have like an opportunity and serve a problem that is like wider and driven for mass adoption. So I think, yeah, really having those like killer use cases where, you're solving a true problem and it just happens to use blockchain technology. And now we're at a point where you can create like a better user experience to where people realize less and less that they may be using the technology in the background. And then beyond that, I do think like a big part of it is having like the right regulation in place to where, you can start to have all the players come into the space who maybe are wary because there's some regulatory uncertainty. So being able to kind of you have to have the great apps, but you also have to have, the regulatory, framework to be able to, leave room for innovation while also protecting consumers and making sure that they're safe as they're, getting exposed to the space and interacting with products.
Yeah. What was your biggest blockchain challenge? What was the thing that really, you felt like was the major hurdle in developing your technology?
In developing my technology, or just like being in the like industry and like being
in the space? Yeah. Like, what was the biggest hurdle and how did you overcome it?
Yeah. So I think that the biggest challenge being in this space in terms of the technology probably was like, I, spend a lot of time actually onboarding people, to the app. Like a lot of the people who were in my lending cooperative were, people who had never had like a crypto wallet. They maybe used Coinbase, but like rarely ever used it in itself. And that gave me the opportunity to see like, oh, wait a second, like this stuff isn't the easiest to use. Like, okay, this person has to remember this, like, secret recovery phrase. Are they going to remember to do that like 3 months down the road? Okay, we have this DAO voting session. Okay, wait, they don't realize the fact that they have to have some like ETH in order to pay for this transaction, right? Like, so I think that there are all these like small friction points that you start to realize, and that when you're in the space, maybe you take for granted and just like, oh, this is the way it is. And yeah, like, but you start to realize that there are all these kind of like user experience gaps that kind of had to be filled. in order for people to have like a seamless experience like they do outside of, kind of like, a blockchain-based product. So I say that's like been the eye-opening thing for me, like, oh, okay, these are the real friction points and like user experience for, everyday people that would drive like mass adoption if you can remove those friction points, right?
Yeah. As you were onboarding people, is there any one story that was like a blockchain transformation story that you saw, like somebody went from, 0 to 10 and really were able to fully adopt and be immersed in it and excited about it?
Yeah, one of the cool things was one of the borrowers that I work with, the Davis system, they basically like provide community organizing for like social and political campaigns. And yeah, like it was really cool. They didn't have much interaction with the blockchain before this. And by the end of it, we provided like 3 small loans to them. By the end of it, one of the founders ended up having like their own ENS, which was like crazy to me. Like, I was like, that is super cool. Like, and bought it without me even bringing it up, talking about it, anything like that. So I think that was kind of one of the coolest things that I saw. Like one of the small businesses that I work with got their own ENS. Like that was awesome.
I love that. What do you feel like is the biggest value of having more inclusion in tech? I mean, we talk, a lot about equity and inclusion and the importance of giving access to people that historically have been blocked out of emerging technology. What do you think is the biggest value proposition for making more of an effort to reach out and create a more inclusive space in blockchain and Web3?
Yeah, I think it's different voices, right? Like, and that people being able to bring in their own perspectives into the room, right? Like me being in space and having the background that I have, like I'm able to create products that are based on my unique experience. And somebody who doesn't look like me, didn't grow up where I grew up, they're not going to have like that depth of experience in that area. So when you think about inclusion, it's about being able to create a room of people who have, different perspectives and being able to use that for creating better products, creating better companies. I think that that's the thing, right? Like you need smart people who have different thoughts in order to create the best possible, product, best possible company.
Yeah, and I feel like we really are in a unique space and time where, everybody talks about how fast Web3 and blockchain moves. Well, AI is moving exponentially even faster than Web3 ever did. Yeah. So when you think, what the next big thing in blockchain and emerging tech is going to be, what do you think is going to be the next big revolution in our space?
I think as a lot of the regulatory stuff gets cleared up, there's going to be more institutional capital that comes in. There's going to be more people who are able to build more friction with less friction as builders, spending less money on legal fees. I think that that's going to allow the industry to move faster as a whole. Now, can I say exactly where all that stuff is going to come from? I know that I pay much more attention to probably like the DeFi, real world asset space. And I do think that like the regulatory clarity will provide like a lot more space for a lot more cool assets to come on chain, which I think will unlock a lot of opportunity for builders as well as like the users that they're going to serve. But I'm certain that like there are going to be other spaces as well that like are going to be beneficiaries of that, shift as well.
Is there one particular application or AI or blockchain application that you're super hyped about right now that you think like this is, that you're using that you're really excited about?
Yeah, like, so, I think that I was one of those people who, I knew that the LLM stuff was going on and like I used it some, but like, I think I've slowly started to incorporate it more and more into my day to day. And I think it's pretty powerful what you can do with them. Like, I use Cursor, which allows me to code like, at least like, 30% faster than I would otherwise. And I'm sure that, as I learn how to use LLMs better, that it could, make the improvement even more dramatic, right? So I think that a lot of this stuff going on with like kind of AI agents, LLMs is just going to make people so much more effective. And I think that that's like a really, really exciting thing. And if I were to think about like what I think about like from day to day, how is this stuff going to get applied to, like small business owners? I think about, kind of all these things going on like with these AI agents and how like for the micro entrepreneur, they're going to be able to use like an AI agent that's able to work in the background and cover their bases and maybe areas that business owner is not strong, or be able to poke them on the shoulder and say, hey, your cash flow is this. These are the things that you might want to consider doing in the meantime. Hey, let me actually send out these 10 emails for you or whatever that you need me to do, right? Like, I think that that's where the future is going to go, that, these agents are going to help the micropreneurs be much more effective. Of course, in the big companies, it's going to drive efficiency and stuff like that. But that's really what I'm excited about. Like, how can you drive the people who have maybe like less than 10 employees, which is a majority of small businesses that exist in the US, I think this stuff is going to really, really transform the amount of work that they can do as the technology gets better and there's more builders come in and focus on those problems.
Well, and that's it's reshaping global economics.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, just changing the game for so many people that, had little obstacles for entry, and it's really changing that. What's your advice in particular for entrepreneurs, founders, creators, especially those who are underrepresented in the space? What is your advice for how that they can really get themselves established in a space where they feel like they're getting the support, they're getting the financial support they need, they're getting the tech support that they need? Where do they start, and how do they start from where they're at right now and get to a space where you have managed to get to in the short amount of time?
Yeah, I mean, I think that a part of it is, being persistent. So you have to think about how you can kind of be persistent, play the long game enough, the game long enough. So that takes some patience. I think a lot can be accomplished with patience and persistence. But as I kind of get more like narrow and kind of like tangible, I think that there are so many opportunities to go to different conferences, go to different meetups, and people are really generally pretty friendly. And if you have a unique perspective and a unique view, like, they're going to want to connect. And I think that you just have to take those connections and sort of run with them, realizing that that's how you build a community. That's how you build your own network that's able to get you like an opportunity, whether it's as a builder, as an entrepreneur, as building a job. But I think a lot of it is just like being able to stay the course and continue to build, continue to show people that you're building, be in their ear and say, hey, I'm building this thing, right? Like, and eventually, like, even if your business isn't like doing the best, they'll just probably throw you a bone just because they see that you're being like persistent and that you're around and you seem smart and like a nice person, right? So I think that that's like the big part, like be in the room, make sure that you're in the room. When you're not in the room, do enough work that you can showcase it so you can get, the support from the people who you met across, along the way.
I love it. All right. So again, just like to fast forward 5 years, where do you see your business? What I always like to, we talk about like really big goals, big dreams, big vision. What would you like to see your business looking like in 5 years and the impact that it has on people worldwide?
Yeah, I want to really revolutionize like small business lending. I think that, there's a lot of room for improvement. I think there's like a lot of guesswork, that it gets done in small business lending right now, where that just leads to like higher interest rates for, small businesses. So my goal is to really look at, these emerging technologies and some of the data that will be collected from using these emerging technologies like AI agents and how that can like revolutionize how underwriting happens. So you can have more accurate pricing, which you can pass off those to lenders. If I think about that from a product perspective, that looks like offering the same technical assistance that a community development financial institution provides, like the business coaching, the tangible help, but being able to automate a lot of that stuff using things like, AI agents, right? It looks like being able to, send referrals to, different community development, financial institutions, CDFIs. So they're able to say, like, you've been offering this automated technical assistance to this small business. You've offered, like, you've shown the fact that they're able to, repay this loan based on these unique data points that you've created, and we can pass off those people and refer people to these institutions that are already doing great work. I think there's so much other work that can also be done with like creating CRMs or like lending platforms that these people can use in order to, be able to go through the whole like loan making process. And, there's just going to be, I think, huge opportunities to also unlock things like secondary markets too. So it's really just looking at like that full scope of like a business that needs help figuring out how they can manage their business to actually being able to service them and making sure that they're able to get passed off to whatever institution that they work with next after they get, their first set of loans and grow up the ladder and continue to grow their business. So it's really just starting with one narrow spot and expanding there into as many different kind of pieces of that puzzle to make small business lending more affordable for small businesses so they can grow more.
How can small business owners tap into your program now? How can they, what's your onboarding processes now that people can learn more about it? What's the first step for somebody who's watching this, who wants to learn more and start figuring out how to apply your technology to their business?
Yeah. So one, they can go to the website and check out what we have going on. And, there's ability for them to kind of like sign up for our newsletter and get updates and stuff like that. In terms of like reaching out to me specifically, my email is garrett@thermon.io. They can reach out to me specifically. Right now, I'm not focused on lending at the moment. We're like taking a step back to be able to get all the legal compliance in order to like increase our lending volume. So, we're not actively, I guess, like seeking applicants for small business owners, but I always love talking to small business owners and love connecting with small business owners. So, they definitely can feel free to connect with me and, we'll be able to have a solution for them coming down the pipeline soon.
I love that. Well, and especially as you're in, evolving that and building it in that space, I know that there are so many small business corporations, 501(c)(3)s, different charitable organizations that are helping, between urban leagues and between local, chamber of commerce groups that are trying to help small business owners. I think it'd be a great, offering to get your voice in that conversation to at least, give people another perspective of what their options are when it comes to lending and finance.
For sure. Thank you. I truly appreciate that. I think so too, but yeah, I appreciate that.
Yeah. Well, we hope that this introduction will be part of that at least gateway that gets people access to understanding more about what their options are. And I think you've done a phenomenal job of laying a space that is accessible, is diverse, is inclusive, and certainly giving people the opportunity to access support that they wouldn't have had otherwise. And that definitely is a big game changer in global economics and inclusivity in our blockchain space. So thank you for that work, Garrett.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, it's a blessing to talk with you. And we'll definitely put all the links so that everybody can follow you from here on out. And we look forward to seeing what the next 5 years for Thermon will look like.
Cheers to that. Cheers to that.